we had the day off or whatever, and she's just like, let's go to my friend's island. It's just literally like right over there. You know, I just noticed an older guy in the pool with the younger girls. Coming from the modeling business, that wasn't anything out of the ordinary. The person that I saw on the island was former Prince Andrew. I met Epstein at that point. A little bit later on, one of the other girls, she knocked on the door and just was like, look, Jeffrey's ready for his massage. Jeffrey said, you have to do it. But I'm like, me? Because I blocked out what happened in that room for so many years. I remember that night just staying up and just staring at the ceiling all night and just counting the hours and the minutes until I could get on that boat and get off of that island. He was, and Glenn and whoever else were abusing minors. That was hard.
I'm sorry.
That was hard.
Hey guys, it's Jakson Buhaj here again with TMZ. Today I'm joined by Lisa Phillips, an Epstein survivor, and also the host of the From Now On podcast. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to say, I'm so thrilled that you're here talking to me today because, we've interviewed in the last couple of months a handful of Epstein survivors who have given very compelling interviews. The same question that I started out asking them, I will ask you. Who were you before Jeffrey Epstein, and how did you come into contact with him?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you for having myself and the girls that you've had on before, my survivor sisters. And all of our stories are very, very similar, but as you'll learn today, the process is different for all of us. Right. Who I was before, very happy, bubbly, loved to be in front of the camera, outgoing. I'm an extrovert, I think, by nature. I always spent a lot of alone time. Right. I always had this little inner thing of visioning what my future was going to be. And I have to say, a lot of what I envisioned from my teenage years have come true. And I've always stuck to, that person inside of me. And my life has derailed and gone in different directions, but I've always had that, knowing inside of me that I've always wanted to be a little bit more in front of the camera and to have an impact on the world. Now that everything's happening like that, it's like, wow, it's what I always envisioned for myself, but I'm also still shocked that it's come about in this way, I never really thought that it was going to be about this master manipulator, serial predator that everyone in the entire world was pretty much obsessed with. And I'm still uncovering so much of my story in the last couple of years that I didn't really understand from back then.
Right. And so, from my understanding, you were 21 when you first came into contact with Epstein. And like you said, you were happy, you were outgoing. What was your first interaction with Epstein like? And how did you get to that point of meeting him?
Well, Epstein's, I guess you can say, genius plan is that he had a lot of the young girls bring other girls, which made you complicit in a way, and that's kind of how he kept you silenced. And so I was also brought by another young girl, and I was just on a photo shoot. I had worked my way after graduating high school in Belgium, and I worked in Europe and traveled a bit around the world as a model, and since I was 15, 16. I found myself in New York, in my early 20s, and really excited to be there with a really good agency. And I was flown to an island to do a photo shoot I was really excited about. And the other young girl that was with me, she was an Eastern European, and we had the day off or whatever. And she's just like, let's go to my friend's island. It's just literally right over there. And he said we can go and hang out there just for the day. We talked to the clients. They were British. And they said, yeah, go ahead and go, just be back. So weird. They would let us go to a totally different island. Makes you wonder who knew what back then. But we did. We just took off for the day and, was sent a boat, went over to an island and just had fun for the day, just hanging out. Nothing was really out of the ordinary. An older guy in the pool with the younger girls. Coming from the modeling business, that wasn't anything out of the ordinary. And then I had a dinner. And I met Epstein at that point, and just a normal dinner, except for the fact that he was an older man we were a bunch of younger girls. He asked a lot of questions about all of us to really get to know us, but I was the new girl, and he just asked a lot of questions about, where I grew up in my life and, my ambitions and things like that. So it just made me feel really comfortable at that point.
Take me into that moment where you walk into the room and Epstein's there. what's he doing? Is there anything you notice about the room that stuck out to you? How did he greet you? You know, what was the conversation like?
Well, you got to remember, in the early 2000s, nobody knew about Epstein. Nobody cared. It wasn't like it was a big deal to meet him at all. So I didn't really think anything of it. It was just the person that owned the island that was at the dinner table. I do know that the other young girls that were there, you know, they were all blonde hair, blue eyed, and not that that really matters, but you know, with him it matters. You know, it was more of a mentoring type of environment. He wasn't a playboy, you know, he didn't have that vibe to him at all. He was more of a mentor and asked those types of questions to really kind of get into your psyche and get to know who you were. And I mean, obviously it's to figure out who you are, how you're going to be easily manipulated or not. But he asked a lot of questions about my family and, you know, how present was my father and things like that, and my major ambitions, what were they? And I was a very ambitious, you know, young person. So I told him, like, I want to, you know, act in films, and one day I want to write a book. I had all these like big aspirations at the time. Can you walk me through the turning point of when you realized this is not at all what I thought this was going to be? Yeah. I think you've spoken to a few survivors, and there's always this point of where something turns. And of course I wasn't expecting anything. We were supposed to get back on that boat and go back to the island. We were not supposed to stay the night. But during dinner it was getting late, and he said, oh, you can't go back on the boat. You're gonna have to stay the night. And so we weren't expecting that, you know. So we did have a change of clothes just because we knew we were going to be. So we just kind of got changed into something to sleep in that night, and we're back in the room just hanging out, had to stay the night. So we just figured we would just, you know, hang out talking and go to bed and then go back to the clients in the morning. It didn't quite go down that way because a little bit later on, one of the other girls from the dinner, she knocked on the door and just was like, look, Jeffrey's ready for his massage. And so that was when the first red flag, because, you know, I wasn't there to give him a massage. And the girl I was with was like, oh gosh, like, I didn't think he was going to do this, but sometimes he likes these like massages. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about, massage? Because I don't know how to, I've never massaged a man before. And you gotta remember, like, I'm in my early 20s, but he was old. So it was just weird. It turned at that point because it was like, no, you gotta do it. You have to do it. And I was just like, I don't wanna do it. And the girl was like, well, Jeffrey said, you have to do it. And so I'm like, me? So I think at that point, it turned a little bit because that's not what I expected, but I didn't expect anything beyond that. I just said, okay, well, we'll just go do this massage. And so I went with her and went all the way across the island to his area where he lived and walked in, and it was an actual massage. We did learn massage techniques. And I mean, I can't really remember if it was 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but after the massage kind of was over, he did flip over, and that's when everything turned. Right. Because that was the moment where it was like, gotcha, you know. So this is what's gonna happen now. And that was orchestrated of what he wanted us to do next. As we all know about Epstein now, it's always a massage that turns into an assault. And he ended up assaulting myself and that other girl there that night in that room. When I hear these testimonies, it's difficult to find the words to respond. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because there aren't any words to describe how horrific he was. Mm-hmm. It's really shocking to think that there are people on this planet that exist like that, that would do things like that. Mm-hmm. I want to touch on something that you briefly mentioned, which was that you learned massage techniques. Walk me through that. Was that something that he told you to learn or somebody else? Well, I say real massage techniques because it's really important to understand that this man liked massages. In part of his sick mind, this massage is part of just bringing you into the room to get you to put your hands on him, right? So it's a massage, but he has a nefarious idea of what's going to happen next, but he's got to get you comfortable with the massage. I mean, every survivor that I've ever talked to that's come in contact with Epstein starts out in a massage. And you can't just pull someone into a room and be like, haha, there's not a massage going on. We're just gonna have a little fun. No, it's an actual massage. So that's what I'm saying. It was an actual teaching you how to massage the muscles and on the back, you know, and just get you to relax and be like, oh, this is not bad.
It seems to be a common method of his grooming, because like you, that's every single story. That is his go-to. Massage, massage, massage. That's the bottleneck for, I'm going to teach you how to get comfortable with touching me. And
Yeah, you're right.
It's
That's,
awfully sick.
yeah.
So again, I'm extremely sorry that happened to you.
That's actually important that you just said that. I never really thought of it like that from like a man's point of view. Like you're just getting comfortable with touching me. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into this, the grooming of getting you to even do a massage to begin with. Yeah.
And so I'm wondering what the aftermath of that was like. Did you go back to the room afterwards?
Yeah, we did. We ran out of there.
You ran out of there?
Yeah, once it was done, it was just done.
Oh, God.
And we ran out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Ran across. I can still vividly even remember running across the island to get back, and staying up. That's what I remember the most, because I blocked out what happened in that room for so many years. Reconnecting with survivors makes me understand and remember, you know, what happened so much in the room. But I remember that night just staying up and just staring at the ceiling all night and just counting the hours and the minutes until I could get on that boat and get off of that fucked up island. You know, so that's what I remember the most.
Would you say your body was almost in this fight or flight mode?
It wasn't even fight or flight, it was frozen.
Really?
Yeah, I was frozen. Yeah, and that's kind of what they get off on, is that fear. You know, when you're sick like that, it's they like that frozen girl that can't do anything and doesn't know what to do, and then the fear in your eyes.
Right. That's the other common theme, is power. I want control over this other person's mind, body, action. Control was a huge foundation of who he was.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing I've picked up on over the year that I've been studying this case. You know, and there's still so much more to learn, which is why I'm thankful that you're here.
Thank you.
Describe the island to me. I mean, some testimony that I've heard is that he was obsessed with paintings, with sculptures, with architecture. Was there anything specifically that stood out to you on there while you were there?
Well, you have to understand there's like the difference of my young mind there that wasn't thinking anything, who thought the island was beautiful, you know, and so no, I didn't notice those things. But now that we're looking at the island and looking at the pictures and stuff like that, now so much more of it makes more sense. But it's not something of someone who's just brought there would really pick up on that. I had just met him, so I didn't really know the way he thought about things. So I would just think of it as being beautiful art. Now we're knowing it's kind of a sick art, you know, and unusual things that were on the island. And I think only as a real adult you can pick up on those things, or knowing him. But back then I just didn't, you know, just la-di-da. I was like, you know, I wasn't thinking anything like that.
Fast forward, you leave the island. Did you hear from him again? Did anybody reach out to you?
Well, this is what I try to explain where the grooming process comes in, because I was a young model. There were hundreds of models that were abused in that time frame.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want anything to do with him, with that island, even with the friend who brought me. I just separated myself from that experience and tried to just move on with my life. But Jeffrey had secretaries that worked for him, and they would call my model agency to try to get me to go back to meet with him. And I think we're missing one important detail, is the person that I saw on the island, I thought, and learned later on, was former Prince Andrew. So I believe when you're in that orbit and you've seen people that are important, and you kind of have seen what goes on that island, you can't really get away, and you have to be in that orbit. And so there has to, now I've just escaped, I'm gone. I think he had to make sure that I was kind of like, no, you're going to be under this control a little bit longer. So his people were reaching out to me over and over for many months, and I didn't respond to it. And it kind of scared me. But there was one day that he called me up, and he just was like, I remembered on the island you said you wanted to be a model with this particular agency. And I was like, yeah, that's a dream of mine. And he said, well, you know, the owner's my best friend, and I told her about you, and I think you should go over and meet with her. And in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have gone. But I think when you've been abused by somebody, you kind of have this thing of like, well, maybe he's a good person, or maybe I did something wrong, or I know that I was thinking of it like that, or just like, you owe me. And it was like, the pie in the sky. It was like my big dream and goal that I had been working toward. I had been in that agency many times, traveling around the world. I'm like, here's my book, okay, not yet, traveling again, here's my book, and so I had been working towards that goal. And what he said was true. Went right up that elevator and said, I'm here to see, blah, blah, blah. Walked right into her office and she goes, I love Jeffrey, And so I'm thinking, oh, wow, this person cares about him and vice versa. So now I know these agents were involved with him, but I didn't know that then. Now I know what's going on in the modeling industry and the exchange of girls back and forth, which is in the news right now. It was in Vogue recently. It was in The Guardian, of these women model agencies along with the men were sending girls back and forth. Pisses me off. I'm the person I am today is because of what happened to me back then, but I had no idea back then. I had no idea. I just fell into this trap. So I became a model with this agency, switched agencies and started working in this world now. Now I'm a model at this agency and around this world.
And his connections, again, another common theme is he would use his connections to embellish himself, to make his victims think, it's actually a privilege to be around me. You should try hard to get as close to me as possible. And even though you're actively trying to distance yourself from what happened, he puts this carrot on a stick of, I actually have what you want if you just come back. And he lures you back in.
Well, that's what he did with every single victim.
Yeah. And it's awful. And did anything progress after that? Did you see Jeffrey again?
Well, I mean, I was one of hundreds of girls during that time. So I don't know how he kept up with it all. He had a lot of enablers, but a lot of girls were offered scholarships to universities, in which many of them went to many universities. I was one of those that was offered that. A lot of them got jobs through them. They got their visas. They married their husbands through him. Had weddings on his ranch, Zora Ranch, or on his island. I mean, he was deeply involved with the modeling agencies and academia and tech and a lot of different things. For what reason? There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and there's a lot of real evidence out there. But for us younger girls, we were just trying to make it in the world, and sometimes in survival mode and sometimes just trusting people that we shouldn't have trusted, So yeah, I was involved in this modeling agency. Sometimes went to events that he orchestrated or charity events. I mean, I remember we all went to the Nutcracker, with him and Ghislaine and a bunch of models. So it just was this world that back then we were involved in, but we didn't really connect the dots.
It was just his way of keeping you in arm's reach.
Well, just not only him, the modeling agencies as well, and other people that we knew. It was all kind of all together, but we just didn't know like we do today. Like why?
How did you break free of that orbit? Because that seems like it's something that you would just get unraveled in with all of the connections and opportunities.
Oh,
How did you get out?
It was always scary because you just didn't really understand what was really going on, but you just couldn't get rid of this person and all those secretaries. Just when you thought you weren't going to hear from him again or those secretaries, they would call up again. And I would try, because I was a model, I would try to go to Greece for 3 months, Cape Town, South Africa for 3 months. I would try to get away as much as I could, just so that I wasn't pulled back into something. Because the girls started whispering back then. Vanity Fair came out with an article in 2003. He took a trip with Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey, and so people started understanding, who's this mysterious man and why is he so connected to all these celebrities and politicians and what's going on? So the girls also started talking. But for me personally, it was a girlfriend who had an assault happen to her that Jeffrey orchestrated with another very powerful person from England. And when that happened, we were just like, what the heck is going on? And she was like, you don't know who this man is. This is not okay. And so we all got together and started talking. And so that's when I started trying to distance myself as much as possible. And because I knew of those two things, what happened on the island and what happened with my girlfriend, he was even trying to hold a little tighter on me. And now I understand now because that person is in a lot of trouble with the royal family. So you have to understand when you're young, it's like your career is important, your friends, and like this is a small part of like my life. It wasn't, it was a questionable thing, but I didn't really understand it back then like I do now, so.
Bringing up Prince Andrew.
Former.
Well, yeah, former Prince Andrew, stripped of his royal title. Speaking of which, cannot believe he's still in line for the throne, even though he's been stripped of his royal title. Thankfully, the king is trying to see to that and get it thrown out, but we'll see what happens. Yeah. The United Kingdom Metropolitan Police is currently asking a security team if they ever saw or heard anything. It's like, they're not going to say anything. They're not going to rat on the person they used to work for. And what does that say to you about the people that Prince Andrew surrounded himself with?
Well, it's been years. I think it's been 6 years since Virginia Giuffre went to them and said, this is what's happening. I mean, this has been out there for many, many years, and even with the files being released and seeing what was there. But you're right. These are very powerful people involved. There's a lot of enablers, and there's a lot to protect. It's very hard for these victims to get justice. It's going to be hard if they ever do. For me, that's not really the focus because we are well aware that it's a tough road ahead, and they are protected, as we see here with our government. So it's a difficult fight.
I want to talk about the victims because something interesting happened today. Where in the Northern District of California, there was a class action lawsuit filed against the DOJ and Google. And I want to focus on the DOJ because this class action lawsuit alleges that they failed on doing the primary thing they said they were going to do, which was redact the identities of the victims. And in this lawsuit, they claim that over 100 victims' identities were leaked, or sensitive information about these victims were leaked. Your father served in the US Air Force, and he also worked for NATO. And I'm wondering, given your background, has the handling by the DOJ of these files changed your perspective of this country?
Absolutely. I think where it really changed for me was at the Pam Bondi hearing and sitting right behind her. I've always had faith in our justice system, you know, that they were at least going to investigate, at least hold some people accountable. I know it's very difficult because it's so vast and so big, and there's so many countries involved and so many people involved. I get that. But being at the Pam Bondi hearing, standing there, sitting there with my survivor sisters, Congress fighting for us, standing up and saying, wait a second here. They were pulling out files and files that were blown up, like 8 feet by 5 feet, huge, saying, look here, you know, like what's going on here? We need answers. And they would ask question after question after question. And she just was like flipping through, looking for something to deflect and like talking about the Dow and talking about this and that. We're like, wait a second here, like answer the questions. But it was that moment where they were like, you need to say something to these survivors behind you, something. And she could have said anything. She didn't have to admit anything, but to at least acknowledge, at least to be like, hey ladies, blah, blah, blah. But she wouldn't even turn her head. Like she wouldn't even turn it like this. I was just like, are you kidding me? Like that was the moment where I was like, oh, we're screwed. Oh, nothing's gonna happen here. She's had those files on her desk for almost a year now. She said, oh, I'm going through the files. We're going to release it soon. The president had his whole campaign on we're going to release these files. It was all like BS.
Right from the beginning, actually.
Right from the beginning.
When he came into office, they were waving around that folder in front of all those cameras saying, we have it, we're going to look through it. And then months went by, we didn't hear anything.
So that moment was just like the moment where I was just like, wow, this is bigger than we ever knew. The protection is bigger.
I thought your speech on Capitol Hill was really encouraging. Like, I thought that was awesome, how you did that along with the other survivors. It was great. Tell me about your podcast from now on. I want to hear about this. How have you used it? You know, another theme I see in Epstein survivors is that they use the trauma to create something beautiful and powerful with it. Seems like you've done exactly that. Talk to me about that.
That's everything right there. What you just said is everything. Because so many victims don't want to talk about what happened to them. Okay, because first of all, it's confusing. First of all, it takes time to understand what happened to them. There's Stockholm syndrome, there's trauma bonding that happens with your abuser. Same with Epstein. A lot of times he was portrayed himself as a mentor and someone that cared about you. So there was always this kind of, I don't know, love-hate is the right word, but this protection over him, not just a fear of speaking out. The podcast came 1 year that I was developing that and speaking out slowly and inviting other survivors to tell their stories. Capitol Hill just came right after that. So I'd gotten used to telling my story a little bit. As you can see when you do watch my speeches, it's not easy for me. It takes a lot of guts and courage on my end to even just to say those things, because there's a lot of shame that's involved. There's a lot of shame even from your own immediate family, from friends, not just from the general public when you're coming forward with something like this crap. You know, this is big. But I just said, you know, I have to do this. And the survivors, we all got together, you know, with Massey and Kana and the other people in our government that wanted to believe in this fight and push this Transparency Act so we can get these files released, so we can understand what's happening. That was an interesting day because I was going to do my speech and I was going to talk about my story a little bit, but I'm empathetic and doing this work with survivors with my podcast and giving them the seat to say, hey, I was a victim, you know, but I'm turning that into a survivor because I'm going to own my story. I'm going to get rid of the shame and put that where it belongs. And I'm going to step into my power again. So that was that moment where I was listening to all these girls, and it's the young girls. You know, I was in my early 20s, and there was hundreds of girls that were in their early 20s, but there was a lot that were 14 and 15 years old. And I have a child that age. And it was making me mad, listening to these stories of these girls that didn't really have a choice of to make a few $100s and give that money to their families and be abused in the way that they were. I was getting angry. Yeah. And when it was my turn, I was one of the last ones to go. I was just like, who the hell do you think you are? You know what I mean? To be able to do this to hundreds of girls and feel like you have all the power over us, that you have files. I mean, how big are these files? And that you're not going to let us know what's going on. You're not going to let us be able to connect the dots and tell our stories and understand what the frig happened to us back then. So I just stood up there and I was like, oh, you think you got it? You think you have the power? Well, you know, I'm gonna take my power back, because you're saying you have a list of people. Well, so do we. Exactly. You don't think we know who was there? Mm-hmm. You don't think we can make our own list? And so I did say that. I think it got flipped and turned every which way. It went global, it went all over the world, that I was going to create this list and read it on the House floor. It was never that. It was like, I'm speaking to survivors out there. Come forward. Let's create our own list and let's talk amongst each other and let's do something about this. Mm-hmm. Let's take our power back. That was that moment.
And you've been building towards that with From Now On. And I think that's really beautiful. That's awesome. Because the power for the files to be released kind of fell onto the people after a certain amount of time. There was so much outcry because everybody knew they existed. And so it was up to the Trump administration, the DOJ, to go, okay, here we go. But then they came out, over 3.5 million files, all those redactions. And the redactions aren't even protecting the victims. There are men in these files and names of co-conspirators that are redacted. They're not victims. They're maybe not even part of an ongoing investigation.
Yeah.
And so when they came out and you saw that, how did that make you feel?
Well, we were toyed with and played with for many months leading up to that point. Right. And that was just another way of just messing around with us. Because you know how easy it is to redact the victims' names and not redact the powerful men's names. I mean, it's very easy to, why did you make that choice? That was a choice. It was awful what they did. My name was redacted, but I knew many, many people, many girls, many women now, whose names were put out there to the general public. That's not okay. A lot of those girls were Jane Does. A lot of them, their emails, their pictures, their private information. You gotta remember, there's hundreds of girls that haven't come forward. And now all of a sudden their names are public. Why would you do that? There's only one reason why you would do that, you know? And why would you protect the men?
Right, exactly.
You know, you're protecting them.
Exactly. Kana and Massey, you know, Kana went in there and he saw the unredacted files and he came out to the press and basically said, guys, oh my God, do you think we only know the tip of the iceberg? Do you think that it goes so much deeper than what we know? And if so, how much? I mean, how severe can this really be?
I haven't been the same person. I'll be honest with you. I haven't been the same person since those files were released January 30th. Yeah, because I've always known about the hundreds of girls in the mauling industry and that were, 19 to 24. I've always known about that. It was hard for me to come to terms with he was, and Galen and whoever else were abusing minors. That was hard.
I'm sorry.
That was hard. That was hard for me. But seeing what came out in the files, in the last couple months, I have no words to describe. We all have seen it. They're written by the people. No one's making this stuff up. It's there in plain English, what they're talking about. It's sick. And I don't understand why, once you see that type of depravity and darkness and sadism, like why you wouldn't look into that. Now it's time to look into it from just seeing that. Like if you don't care about the girls overage and you don't care about these underage, but when you're talking about children or babies or whatever else is going on, I think it's time to do something about it. And when people can't do what's right, I'm just losing faith in humanity at this point.
I mean, to go from where you were after meeting Jeffrey Epstein initially to now, you've had an incredible arc.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been through so much, not just your own self-healing journey, but also under the oppression of these powerful, influential men. And somehow you managed to break out of that. And
not easily.
Not easily. It was not an easy thing to do. And I admire you for that.
Thank you.
No doubt about it, our audience does as well. What has your healing journey been like? How difficult was that for you?
Whew. The healing journey has not been easy. Yeah. Unfortunately, like a lot of the victims I think that are still out there and still silenced, I just suppressed it for 15 years. I didn't talk about it. If I saw it on the news, it was just turned a blind eye. I just didn't want to even go there in my mind that man was that bad. Someone that I knew and someone I had basically stuck up for many years. Oh, he's a great guy. He was a mentor. He did good things for me, and not thinking about anything else. And I still have friends who still say that, I still, they don't want to even think about it because it's just too much to take on. And I think if it had just been my story to speak out about, I probably would have never have done it. I only started speaking out for the first couple of years was because of Virginia Giuffre and wanting to support her story. For my girlfriend who was abused and wanting to support her story and wanting to support other survivor stories. It took me a long time to get to my story. And it was after meeting more survivors, we're like, got a picture of you from back then, like you were here, you were there, and I'm just like I blacked out all of that because it's just, it's kind of too painful. And that is the survivor struggle, is that most people don't even want to think about what happened to them. But what I can tell you and what I've learned from my podcast of me telling my own story and sitting there with guests that have been through domestic violence, stalking, serial predators, the big ones, and even just down to child abuse. We all have the same shame of not wanting to confront what happened to us. But I can tell you when you do, that's when everything is revealed of who you really are. Because you just have to own it, and understand it. Go through the therapy, talk to somebody about it, or even be public about it. The more public I've been, the more powerful I'm feeling, and the more I don't even own that anymore. The more I know I was innocent. I was a young girl, just trying to make the best of things. That was a master manipulator and groomer that I was up against. You have to come to terms with that to be able to move on from it and find your inner authentic voice.
You could say that this tragic experience formed you into an icon that empowers other women who have had these experiences to speak out like you, which is awesome.
Aww.
It's fantastic.
I love that.
It's awesome.
So
Icon.
I would
really.
hope that
Yeah.
I could be that voice for people.
A figurehead as well. And,
Wow.
if you could send a message to any girls watching this that feel the shame that you felt, what would that message be?
Well, just for you to understand that it wasn't easy for me to stand up on Capitol Hill each time I go. Each time you can hear my voice breaking. It's not easy. I will tell you, it is not easy. I hear the public. I hear them. And the DMs, the emails, all the letters I get, everything. I hear them. And after Capitol Hill, there was hundreds of people that reached out just to say, you know, like, you inspire me or you empower me. And that just touched me, and that made me be like, I got to keep doing this. You know, and I was in Ireland recently on the Late Late Show, which is their big show, and that wasn't easy. I was sweating like crazy because I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, wasn't what I envisioned being on a TV show and talking about it. That's just not easy. Yeah. But after that, I had so many people reach out to me, and I'm talking about men that reached out to me who were just like, Lisa, never told anybody this, you know, but I was abused when I was a child 20 years ago, 50 years ago. And that's what really touches me, you know, to know that someone's holding this secret for so many years, never told anyone, and they're like, I want to tell you because you inspire me. That's why I continue doing this.
What does it feel like to be that for people? It must be incredible.
I used to feel like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. How am I going to handle this? How am I going to respond to everybody who's reaching out? But that's why I have the podcast, is to be able to have that voice for those people. I think it's a movement right now. And people are breaking, and they want to own what happened to them.
It's a commodity in media. People need platforms to go and talk about their experiences in a safe, non-judgmental space.
Yeah, like what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
not just talking about celebrities anymore. Like, you know what I mean? You're talking
that.
about real issues.
Well, coming from you, that means so much, because I'm just a 21-year-old that liked YouTube starting out. So to be sitting here with you, someone with a massive platform, someone that's spoken on Capitol Hill, stood before Congress, it's huge. So thank you so much.
Thank
Words
you.
cannot describe. I got one more question for you to round this out. What's next for Lisa Phillips?
Well, I'm going to continue this fight and continue being a person that empowers others to also find that voice inside. The podcast, that's what's next. I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of it, and we're looking for a home right now with my team and my manager, to have these stories of survivorship and also education and empowerment.
Right.
That's where it's going to be right now, and that's where I feel really comfortable with my voice.
Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. I think you are absolutely fantastic. I think you're a wonderful human being. I think you're strong. I think you're a badass. And I think the world needs more people like you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for saying that.
Absolutely amazing.